Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Troy Clayton, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Navy is Captain Lisa Batchelor. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that support them. We also acknowledge the members of the RSL and Services Club Association, RSL Victoria, and RSL Queensland, who are watching this ceremony broadcast around Australia. Also this evening, wreaths will be laid by visitors as well as family and friends at the base of the Pool of Reflection. Please stand and join in singing the National Anthem. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where family and friends could mourn their loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and operations for more than a century. But first we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Lieutenant Sydney Kelso Ford. Sydney Ford was born in Maryborough, Queensland on the 25th of December 1891 to Thomas and Emma Ford. Thomas Ford worked in a bank, but when he was asked to transfer to Charters Towers, his wife refused to accompany him. Instead, he bought a hotel. His wife began drinking heavily and neglected the family, and in 1900 she left to live with a locomotive fireman with whom she had been having an affair. Thomas Ford took his sons to live in Brisbane, which was a much more stable influence on the young family. Sydney attended the Brisbane Grammar School, passing his junior and senior exams, and went on to pass the matriculation exam for Science and Engineering for Queensland University. Instead of attending university, however, he undertook a surveying apprenticeship in Brisbane and went on to work for the Survey Department of the Water and Sewerage Board in Queensland. Ford was well known in rowing circles, and in November 1914 was one of a winning pair in a competition on the Brisbane River. Ford enlisted in the Australian Imperial Force in June 1915, shortly after hearing of the death of his brother Thomas Ford, who was killed in action at the Dawn Landing on Gallipoli. 4 months later, Sydney applied for and received a commission before leaving for overseas service in January of 1916. He continued his training in England. Lieutenant Ford joined the 9th Battalion in France in early July 1916. 2 weeks later, the battalion participated in operation to capture the French village of Pozières. During the attack, Ford was in charge of a line of infantry, and he rushed forward when it was time to go. There were reports that he rushed too far ahead and ran into his own artillery barrage. While out in no man's land, Lieutenant Ford's good friend, Lieutenant Whitcop, who had been in charge of the line behind him, was badly wounded. Ford got hold of him, saying, "Come on, Whit, I'll give you a hand along." They got into a shell hole, but were pinned down by artillery fire. They lay there for some time, chatting quietly to each other. Whitcop remembered that Ford seemed to stretch out at one point and then stop talking. Whitcop became alarmed and began to shake him, but it was of no use. Ford had been hit by shrapnel. Whitcop later wrote, "You can imagine how utterly surprised and grieved I was. I could hardly move, but by the flash of bursting shells I could see his face, which was quite composed. He looked just as if he was sleeping." Ford's body was never recovered, and today he has no known grave. He was 24 years old. His father later established the Ford Memorial Medal for Poetry in memory of his two sons. Described as an award in honour of two gallant brothers, the Ford Memorial Prize is still given annually for the best poem in English, submitted by an undergraduate student at the University of Queensland. Sydney Ford's name is listed on the Roll of Honour, on my right, along with 60,000 others from the First World War. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Lieutenant Sydney Kelso Ford, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world. They shall not grow old as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub of Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the last post ceremony. We'd like to thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial. Wish you all a very good evening. Thank you.